I'm Nicole. Thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in to this channel. I truly appreciate you. And if you're new here and you enjoy whispered true crime, please consider subscribing to the channel. I post 2 times a week, on Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I recommend using headphones if you would like to hear the gentle mic brushing. Now, before we get to tonight's case, please make sure that you are subscribed with your notification bell on, and please leave it a like if you don't mind. Thank you. So tonight we are traveling to Nevada. Shout out to all my friends in Nevada. This case took place in 2021, and it is the case of Daniel Halseth. So let's start with a little background on him. Daniel Halseth was born in Estacada, Oregon. Now I know some people are going to say I pronounce it wrong. It's Oregon or something like that, but I pronounce it Oregon. Okay, alright. Anyway, he was born on January 28th, 1976. He had a great love of music, and he was very talented at playing the piano and the drums. He was even given the nickname of Drummer Dan. After he graduated from Hood River Valley High School, he then attended Western Oregon State University, where he got a bachelor's in music. And then he went on to get a master's in business, or an MBA, from Corbin University. He became an expert in the field of information technology, and he was said to be a, quote, valuable consultant and facilitator on projects nationwide, end quote. In the year 2001, he married a woman named Elizabeth Schwarak. She was 7 years younger than him. She was also from Oregon. They went on to have 3 children, one in 2002, 2003, and the youngest in 2004. And the youngest was named Sierra, and she will be the focus of this case. In 2006, while they were still living in Oregon, Dan lost his job, and Elizabeth was working for a tow truck company, but that wasn't enough to pay the bills. So they moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where Dan was able to find a good job. So the whole family moved to Las Vegas. And once they settled in there, Elizabeth became interested in politics. And she ran for Senate. And she was successful in becoming a Republican member of the Nevada Senate beginning about the affair. He called her up to the bedroom. They started arguing. Things began escalating, and at one point Daniel dropped down to his knees in front of Elizabeth and he yanked down her pants. Left her underwear on though. And he said to her, quote, "What's he got that I don't have? Does he have a big blank? I'm your husband. I just want to know what I'm up against." End quote. And when she told him to stop it, he did. And I guess she told the story to her mother because 5 days later, Daniel and Elizabeth were coming home from a counseling session, like marriage counseling, at their church. When they got home and found the police had broken down their door, and Elizabeth's parents were there, and they're like, what is going on here? So apparently Elizabeth's mother had came for a visit. Nobody answered the door, but when she looked inside, she saw Elizabeth's purse, and she thought to herself, something must be wrong because Elizabeth wouldn't leave without her purse. So she called the police, and she told them that there had been a sexual assault between the two 5 days earlier, and she was very worried about Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth never reported it. She never referred to it as a sexual assault either. So the police spoke to the couple to find out the full story, and they both told basically the same story with one exception. She claimed that he touched her on top of her underwear in an inappropriate place, and he claimed that he didn't do that. He had touched her hips. But nonetheless, he was arrested for open and gross lewdness. He pled guilty to misdemeanor counts of coercion and battery, and he got 6 months probation. So they ultimately divorced in 2012, and Elizabeth was given primary custody of all 3 children, but Dan had regular visitation rights. And the divorce was very difficult on Sierra, the youngest daughter. It seemed that she had become very distant from everyone around her. They described her as very selfish, self-centered, and very difficult. And Daniel went out of his way to try to bond with her in ways that she was receptive to, such as through music. We took her on a skiing trip. He spent a lot of quality time with her, from what it sounds like. But later that year, Elizabeth and her new boyfriend, Tiger, moved to Alaska and took the 3 kids. Now, Alaska is very, very far from Nevada. In case you are from out of the country, it is not the kind of trip that you want to have to take to go visit your kids. Okay, it's the kind of thing where you're going to see your kids maybe twice a year if they live in Alaska. So of course Dan was distraught with this. Anyway, he wound up remarrying, and he moved down to Texas in 2013. He wound up divorcing his second wife in 2019, and then by 2020, Elizabeth had married Tiger, and she moved with her kids back to Las Vegas again. So there's a bit of moving going on, which of course is not that great for So he petitioned the court to get a change made in the custody. And at the same time, he rented the house from his friend Peggy and decided he would stay there. During the custody hearing, he was told to return Sierra back to her mother's house until, the hearing was completed, and so he did. But as soon as he dropped her off, she basically took off and ran away and came back to his house. Now, at a custody hearing after that had occurred, Elizabeth said that she hadn't seen her daughter in months. She said, quote, "Daniel and his home isn't a healthy one. He has clearly been bashing me and speaking negatively about me and lying to Sierra, which has negatively impacted my relationship with her. I want my daughter back. I want her to be healthy again, and emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically healthy again. I want what's best for her, and she deserves that." So Dan replied, quote, "It feels like reality TV every time I hear Elizabeth speak. I have no idea why she's saying the things that she's saying." End quote. He claimed that Sierra was in a toxic environment at Elizabeth's house, and he said that at his 4-bedroom home, quote, "The living arrangements are perfect here." End quote. Elizabeth then said that Dan was making up everything and that he didn't really make a sincere effort to return Sierra to her house. She said, quote, "He can say he returned her, but it was an obvious plan for her to return to him in a couple of hours, and he literally just dropped her off to say, 'Your Honor, I followed the court orders to drop her off.'" End quote. Now the judge said the following, quote, "I saw a lot of things with Sierra that caused me concern. It indicates to me that something else is going on with Sierra, and I don't know who at this point is to blame for that. But I'm less concerned about placing blame than I am with regard to this child and the child's relationship with a parent." End quote. So, the judge pushed for joint custody, and he stated, quote, "We need to get therapy in place at this point moving forward. I haven't gotten to the bottom of what is or isn't happening with Sierra, but I am extremely concerned with what is not happening with Sierra. Hopefully this is not something one of the two of you are promoting, because the lifetime damage to this child is something you'll have to bear on your conscience moving forward." End quote. So now, Daniel tried to give a letter to the judge that he said was written by Sierra, but the judge would not take the letter, would not read the said, "You can't see this guy anymore." And Sierra was like, "Okay, whatever." Like, she did not make a big fuss about it. She just continued on talking to him anyway, and nobody knew. She kept it private. Now, on April 7th, 2021, Dan had been away on business in Boston for a couple days, and he had left Sierra at his house. Supposedly alone, but Aaron had stayed with her. So anyway, he came home, and then the next day, April 8th, his mother, whose name is Christine, was trying to get in contact with him, but she couldn't. So she texted Sierra to say, "What's up? I'm trying to get in touch with your dad." And Sierra said, "Oh, his phone's not working. Yeah, he's trying to get that fixed, and he's in the shower right now, so he can't talk to you." But Christine, her grandmother, Dan's mother, felt it was a little fishy, and she said if she didn't hear back from Daniel soon, she was going to call the police. And then she went ahead and she called Peggy, the friend who was renting Daniel the house. So she told her she was worried and asked Peggy to go check on him. So the next day, Friday, April 9th, Peggy and her friend named Joey went over to the house, and the door was left unlocked. The house was filled with smoke, and then in the garage they found a body, which had clearly been set on fire. They believed that body belonged to Sierra, because there was nobody there, okay, other than the body. So they called the police, who ultimately identified the body as belonging to Dan, who was 45 at this time. And his body was severely burnt. The cause of death was sharp force injuries. He had 70 stab wounds on his body. More than half of the injuries were to his neck, head, and shoulder area. One of his wrists was partially dismembered. They didn't find any soot in his lungs, so he had died before the fire was set. And when they looked at the evidence, it was clear that he had been attacked while he was on the couch in the living room. There were no signs of forced entry, and there was even a key left in the front door. They also saw mops around and cleaning agents. They saw a table saw, a chainsaw, and blades all over the place. And they found some receipts. One of the receipts was from Bank of America. And so they contacted Bank of America to find that there was surveillance footage of this transaction, which showed Sierra in Daniel's car. She was driving. Aaron was sitting next to her, and she had taken out $1,300 from an account which was owned by her father and his ex-wife. Somehow they still had a joint account. There were other receipts as well. One was from Home Depot, where you could see Aaron on the surveillance buying saws and blades. And then you could see Sierra at the Winco store buying bleach. So they put out warrants for the arrest arrests of these two teenagers, and it didn't take long to find them. It was April 13th when they were found in Salt Lake City, Utah. They were on a bus, and surveillance footage showed them making out while on the bus. They were asked for their tickets, and they didn't have any tickets. So when they turned their ID over to the police officer, he did a little background check and found out that the two of them were wanted for a murder in Las Vegas. So back they went. The police took possession of Sierra's cell phone. Now on this cell phone, they found a video, which is now available all over the internet, so you can watch it if you would like. It's just a short little video where you see the two of them. It looks like they're both laying down, and like one of them is holding the phone above both of their heads, and they look very, very happy, very, very lovey-dovey. And Aaron says, quote, "Welcome back to our YouTube channel, day 3 after murdering somebody," end quote. Sierra says, "Whoa, don't put that on camera." And then she says, "We had plenty of sex today." And Aaron says, "It was worth it. It was payment for doing it." So you just get a sense of how little remorse they had. They had zero remorse. Now, as if they didn't have enough evidence with everything, they found DNA. Sierra's DNA was on one of the knives, and Aaron's DNA was on the other knife. Their original plan had been to dismember Daniel and try to dispose of him, but when they found out that the grandmother was going to call the police, they panicked and they set him on fire and took off in a hurry. Now, it's important to note that in Las Vegas, a person who is 16 or older is automatically charged as an adult. So they were extradited to Clark County, where they were both charged with Daniel's murder, as well as conspiracy, arson, robbery, and fraudulent use of a credit card. They originally pled not guilty, but in May of 2022, they both changed their pleas to guilty of 9 counts, including murder, arson, and robbery. And on October 20th of 2022, they were both sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Now, Aaron did face the death penalty since he was actually 18. But he pled guilty, so he avoided that entirely. Now, in an interview after sentencing, Aaron said that the murder was both of their ideas, and he believed that Daniel had been abusing Sierra. He said he feels remorse every single day, and that he has mental health problems that he had not been taking his medication for at the time of the murder. He said he also was taking LSD. shown any remorse. Now, after the trial and the sentencing, Elizabeth, Sierra's mother, said the following, quote, "This is the only time I will address this during the campaign. I will always love my daughter. It horrifies me that our system didn't take the abuse she was receiving seriously before it came to this. My daughter was abused by her father. That is a fact. That doesn't excuse all of her actions. At the time, she was a minor and has taken responsibility like an adult. She is now facing the consequences like an adult." End quote. And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some of mine. First of all, rest in peace to Daniel. And my heart goes out to his family, especially to his 2 older children who have to live with the tragedy, the trauma of all this. Now, first question, and to address what Elizabeth had said. She insisted that Sierra was being abused by her father, and that is why Sierra killed him. She said yes, it was wrong to kill him, but she blamed the system for not taking care of whatever was going on before it came to this. Now, I don't know for a fact, obviously, what was going on behind anybody's closed doors, but there has not been any evidence shown that either parent was abusing Sierra or that there was abuse in either home. Granted, we don't, like I said, I don't know for sure. But if her father was abusing her, why did she want to live with him so badly? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, her father was abusing her, that's why she kept running away and going to stay with her father. To me, that doesn't make sense. And she was telling her father that bad things were going on at her mother's house, but we don't know if that was happening either. It could have been, but it would be irresponsible of me to even suggest that it might have been, I don't know. Could it have been? Yeah. But we have no reason to say that it was. From what I'm presented with, it seems like she might have been playing them against each other. Telling her father that her mother was abusive, and telling her mother that her father was abusive. That is what it sounds like to me. I could be wrong. Now, I understand she had a difficult upbringing in that she had to move around, as I said before. They lived in quite a number of places. There was a messy divorce. There was a difficult custody battle. And that is terrible, and I'm not saying that that is easy to deal with for anyone. And I myself have had personal experience with messy divorces and messy custody battles as a little child, and it is not pretty. So many people have lived through these kinds of unfortunate circumstances and have not murdered anyone. So I don't believe that that is any kind of excuse whatsoever. And clearly she had no remorse. If you saw the video of her and her boyfriend, she was giddy, she was happy, she was having a grand old time after her father was dead for 3 days. And she had murdered him and then tried to dismember him, and yet she's laughing, and they had sounds more like she wanted to be able to be with her boyfriend Aaron, and her father was telling her she wasn't allowed to be with him. So, and she had had the taste of freedom. Her father had been out of town for a couple days, and she and Aaron had the house to themselves, and it was great. So, they both figured, let's get rid of your dad, we could take his car, we can take some money, and we can run away. But they didn't think it through at all. They left every possible bit of evidence that they possibly could have left. Panic or no panic. If they knew the police were on the way, you'd think they would have at least tried a little harder. But they were very young and, let's face it, very stupid. So, luckily, justice has been served. They are both in prison facing life sentences. Granted, that will never bring back Daniel Halseth, and that is the saddest part of the whole thing. A man who loved his children and even paid special attention to Sierra to try to get her through whatever it was she was going through, and she repaid him by murdering him, by stabbing him 70